You're listening to the BBC World Service. This is Newshour. The question of what sportsmen and women eat has flared up from time to time, with it never really being clear how much a difference it makes. Chips, beer and cigarettes, probably not a great plan, but if you reach a basic threshold of good dietary practice, does it really matter what you tuck into? Back in the 1980s, the clash between the chess players Anatoly Karpov and Viktor Korchnoi revolved in part around Karpov's yoghurt consumption. And at Wimbledon this year, there have been stories about Andy Murray's sushi habits. Apparently, he consumes 50 portions in one setting. Ben Wilson is a nutritionist and personal trainer, and I asked him what he would advise Andy Murray to eat.
Well, if he's trying to get fit, then he's trying to get that balance, because most people aren't professional athletes where they make millions of pounds from being, that 1% better. So he's trying to get that balance in place. So the amount of protein, the amount of carbs, the amount of fat, in moderation, people are going to be making progress. And then there's certain foods that are going to affect the body worse than for other people.
Okay, but what I'm really getting is that for a top-level athlete, does it make a difference?
Oh, most definitely for top-level athletes. Because if you think, how much gap is there between the top four, Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, Murray, it's not huge. So these little 1%ers, 2%ers, whatever it may be, can make a huge difference.
But what does it make you? Does it make you more lively? Does it make you quicker?
It allows you to recover from training better. So often what you'll have is, if your nutrition's poor, you'll pick up like niggles, which you wouldn't ever put down to the food, for example. You think, well, I've just played 5 hours of tennis. But when your nutrition's poor, you pick up more niggles, therefore you can train less. So it really does make that accumulation. But it's not quite, so you don't quite link A to B quite so obviously, but it is a huge influence.
Yeah, but for instance, if you drink coffee, you feel pretty lively. It wakes you up, doesn't it? So is that a good idea before you go out for a Wimbledon final to have a cup of coffee?
Well, you need to check with the drug guidelines. If you have 4 cans of Coke, if you have 4 cans of Coke for the Olympic final, you're banned. So
because 4 cans of Coke.
Yeah, because it is caffeine. There's no doubt about it. Especially a fatigue event, it's going to stimulate you and help you. So hence the FDA drug regulations and so forth.
Right. 4 cans of Coke?
That'll ban you in the Olympic final. Maybe even less now. I would have to check the latest ones.
Really?
But previously, yeah.
And what about pasta? Because cyclists always eat pasta, don't they?
Yeah, so you got to understand a little bit about the sport, because cyclists are doing a lot of miles. They need a lot of calories, and it's one of the routes they need to go down. Obviously, something like tennis is not the same. They're not cycling 150 miles. So it's looking at how much that they need. And obviously, recently with, Djokovic, he went on a gluten-free diet, which therefore eliminates pasta. And he put down a lot of his success down to that change in his diet.
Seriously?
Yeah, so what he was saying is, this coach said, let's cut this out. It turns out he was a celiac disease, which means he reacts very, very strongly to pasta and gluten. So when he cut it out, he got a lot better returns. And that's what he puts down to a big part of him going from, a top quality player to where he is now, arguably the best in the world.
I wonder about these footballers, because, they're meant to be, they're paid enough, aren't they? And they're meant to be top-level athletes and all that. But you see them in the newspapers boozing until late into the night, fairly consistently throughout their playing career. Does that not affect their performance?
Well, it's an interesting one. With skill sports, there's a bit more of a leeway. For example, if I'm really skillful at kicking a ball in from a free kick, then you're going to be a big fan of my skills.
You can do that with a hangover?
Possibly not as good, but it's not the same extent as if you're on the athletics track, there's no hiding place. If you're not, if you're 2 seconds down, that could be the difference between first and 10th place, and that's, huge. So, but on skill sports, if I'm good with my skills, then nutrition is not it's still hugely important, but it does not, in athletic sports, there's no hiding place. It's got to be on the money.
What sort of sports do you normally train people for?
I wrote a book on rugby training, so rugby's my main area. And that, if you look at nutrition, 15, 20 years ago, that was beer, pies, and so forth. Now, not a chance. They are top quality athletes, which is why they're so big, they're so quick, they're so strong, because they've all come into the modern era of sports performance.
Yeah. Have you ever trained a chess player?
I've never trained a chess player. It'd be interesting nutrition for that.
Yeah, exactly. What would you recommend for a chess player?
What I would do, and not joking aside, is when you have different meals, it affects your energy and concentration after the event. So what I did with a chess player, I'd have a certain meal protocol, and then we'd check in to see how his concentration levels were, his energy levels were during the game, and we'd manipulate it until he finds the ideal zone for him to go on and perform. I don't think it's quite as important to say cycling, but hey, still could help a little bit.
Non-committal there. That was Ben Wilson, nutritionist and personal trainer.